The human fleet drifted silently at the edge of uncharted space, surrounded by nothing but the vast, empty darkness of the unknown. Captain Elias Hawke stood at the bridge of the lead warship, his fingers tightly gripping the command console as he gazed out into the infinite void. The silence of space was always unsettling, especially when there was nothing but the hum of the engines to fill the emptiness. They had been patrolling this sector for days now, ever since they had received a cryptic transmission from an unknown source. The message had been short, almost like a warning, but they had no idea what to expect. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sharp ping of an alarm. The sensors had picked up something. A mass. It was moving fast, far too fast to be a natural object. Elias's heart skipped a beat as he turned to his crew. "What do we have?" he asked, his voice tight with the first signs of unease. Lieutenant Nora Vega, the fleet's top tech specialist, was the first to respond. "Captain, it's not on our charts. The object is moving at an incredible speed. It doesn't match anything in our database." Before Elias could respond, the ship's systems flickered, and a map of space appeared on the large screen before them. There in the distance, a large, dark mass was growing larger by the second. The human fleet was closing in on it. "What the hell is that?" Elias muttered under his breath. The image was terrifying. Hundreds, no, thousands of ships, all alien, all moving toward them in perfect formation. They were massive, far larger than any human vessel. Their sleek designs and eerie, dark surfaces reflected no light, making them appear as shadows against the vastness of space. The camera zoomed in on the alien Armada, the sheer scale of the ships almost impossible to comprehend. The human fleet, with its advanced warships, was tiny in comparison. Elias could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Outnumbered, outgunned, and far from home, they were facing something they had never encountered before. He knew that, unless a miracle happened, this could very well be their last stand. "Prepare for battle stations," Elias ordered, his voice calm but strained. The crew scrambled into action, their movements sharp and quick. The fleet's weapons powered up, their energy shields humming as they braced for impact. Everyone on the bridge could feel the tension rising. The entire fleet was on edge, and they had no idea what they were about to face. Would the aliens communicate, or would they just attack? The unknowns were endless. As the enemy ships drew closer, it was clear that this wasn't just a routine skirmish. This was an invasion. The alien ships looked monstrous, bristling with weaponry. Huge, pulsating energy weapons lined their hulls, while the sleek, dark armor made them almost impossible to target. Their speed was like nothing the humans had ever seen. This wasn't a typical first contact scenario. This was a full-scale attack, and they were completely unprepared for it. The human fleet readied their weapons, and the tension reached a boiling point. The aliens did not show any signs of slowing down. Their ships closed the gap quickly, and it became clear that the humans were being trapped. Elias knew they had only one option left: fight. "All ships, open fire," he commanded, his voice loud and firm. The first volley of energy blasts shot into the void, lighting up the dark space around them. The battle began with a sudden fury. But just as the humans unleashed their first wave of attacks, something strange happened. In the debris field between the two fleets, a faint glow began to appear. At first, it was barely visible, just a flicker of light in the cold blackness of space. But then, as if it were responding to the ongoing battle, the glow intensified. It wasn't like anything they had seen before. It wasn't a ship, and it wasn't a weapon. It was something ancient, an artifact. The humans had no idea how it had appeared there, or why it was even in their path, but its presence seemed to shift the entire dynamic of the situation. As the artifact's glow brightened, it seemed to pulse with energy. The crew of the human fleet watched in stunned silence as it slowly rotated in space, suspended by forces they couldn't understand. Then it happened. The artifact released a powerful pulse, one that could be felt throughout the entire battlefield. At that moment, the alien armada, which had been charging toward the human fleet at full speed, stopped. The ships didn't slow down. They didn't change course. They simply froze, as if the pulse had completely neutralized their systems. Their weapons powered down, and the eerie stillness of space returned. The human fleet, too, stood in stunned silence. No one moved. No one knew what to do. The artifact continued to pulse, its energy radiating across space in waves, creating a strange force field that seemed to affect both fleets. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The calm was so complete that even the hum of the ship's engines seemed distant and muted. Captain Hawk couldn't believe what he was seeing. The aliens who had moments ago been preparing to destroy them were now motionless, their ships hanging in space like statues. A sense of dread washed over the human crew. Was this a trap? Had the aliens been waiting for them to reach this exact point? Could the artifact be a weapon that would turn the tables against them? Or was this their only chance of survival? Elias knew they had to be careful. They couldn't trust the artifact. They couldn't trust the silence that had suddenly descended upon the battlefield. "Hold your fire," Elias barked, his voice firm as he stepped forward. He had no idea what was going on, but there was no way they were going to waste their only chance at survival. The seconds dragged on. Tension mounted, thick in the air, as both fleets waited in uncertainty. The humans couldn't move forward with the attack, and the aliens weren't making any aggressive moves either. The silence was deafening. Something had changed, but no one knew what it was or what would happen next. All they could do was wait. Elias's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was the artifact a gift, a weapon, or just a malfunctioning relic of a forgotten age? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but there was no way to know. One thing was certain, though. The artifact had changed everything. Whether that change was for better or worse, they could only hope to find out. As the human fleet held its position, the alien ships remained motionless. Captain Hawk turned his eyes to the stars, trying to calm the growing storm inside him. He knew that this moment, this brief, strange silence, would determine the fate of humanity. Would they survive, or would this alien threat be their end? The strange stillness in space stretched on, leaving the human fleet suspended in a state of uncertainty. Captain Elias Hawk stood on the bridge, his eyes locked on the massive alien armada that remained frozen in place. His mind raced, unable to fully process what was happening. The mysterious artifact, which had appeared out of nowhere, was now the focal point of everything. The alien fleet, once charging toward them with overwhelming force, had stopped cold, almost as if it were under the artifact's control. But what was this artifact? What did it mean for the future of humanity? The question swirled in Elias's mind, but he had no answers. For now, all he could do was watch, wait, and hope that the artifact didn't bring more harm than good. Lieutenant Nora Vega, the fleet's top tech specialist, was already moving to investigate. Her mind worked quickly, processing data from the artifact's energy readings and trying to make sense of its purpose. She had been the first to detect the artifact's strange power, and now it was up to her to figure out how it worked. Nora's fingers danced across her console as the artifact's readings came in. "Captain," she said, her voice calm but filled with intrigue. "I think I've found something. This artifact. It's not just a relic. It's far more advanced than anything we've ever seen." Elias looked over at her, his gaze sharp. "What do you mean, more advanced?" "I mean it's a weapon," she replied, her voice filled with awe. "But not like anything we've encountered before. This thing, it can override energy fields, shut down shield generators, and even control AI systems. It's like it has complete dominion over anything technological. If we figure out how to use it, we could control the battlefield, maybe even the entire war." A sense of both hope and fear settled over Elias. This could be the edge they needed, the key to turning the tide of this fight. But it was also dangerous. They were dealing with forces far beyond their understanding, and if the wrong hands got hold of the artifact, the consequences could be catastrophic. Can we control it? Elias asked, his voice laced with caution. Nora hesitated, her eyes scanning the data. I'm not sure. It's not responding to standard commands. It's like it has a will of its own. If we try to use it without understanding its full capabilities, we might make things worse. Elias took a deep breath. They were stuck between a rock and a hard place. The artifact could give them a fighting chance against the alien threat, but it could also bring disaster. As the captain, he had to weigh the risks, but time was running out. The aliens weren't staying still forever. Keep working on it, Nora. I need to know what we're dealing with, and fast. As Nora continued her analysis, Elias's thoughts were interrupted by a new alert. The sensors were picking up an additional energy signature, a much larger fleet, much farther away, and closing in quickly. The artifact, it seemed, was not just a beacon for the alien armada in front of them. It was broadcasting a signal that was being detected by someone, or something, far beyond their reach. And from the size of the signature, it was clear that this new force was even more powerful than the one they had just encountered. Captain, we have a problem, Nora said, her voice tense. That artifact is sending out a signal, and it's being tracked by another fleet. They're coming for us. Fast. Elias felt his heart race. This was not just a war against one alien fleet. Now, they were facing two powerful enemies. How long until they arrive? He asked, his voice calm but sharp. Less than an hour, Nora responded. If we don't act now, we'll be caught between two galactic powers. The realization hit Elias hard. The artifact, which could have been their weapon of salvation, was now a liability. They had no way of knowing who this new force was, but the possibility of facing two hostile fleets was terrifying. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned. If the artifact didn't work, they would be crushed. If it did work, they might have a chance. But at what cost? Before Elias could make a decision, a transmission came through. The voice that filled the bridge was cold, menacing, and alien. This is Scaris, the voice said, the name echoing through the communication channels. Leader of the Zahar Empire, you are in possession of something that you do not understand. That artifact, which you foolishly think of as a weapon, is something far more significant. It is not meant for destruction. It is a tool of peace, a key to uniting the galaxies. It once brought many worlds together, but its power has been corrupted over time. Now, only one side will claim it. The crew on the bridge exchanged uneasy glances. Elias clenched his fists, trying to control the rising tension in his chest. We're not interested in your peace, Scaris, he said, his voice steady. We're just trying to survive. Scaris's laughter echoed through the comms. Survive? You're too late for that. The artifact belongs to the Zahar Empire. If you wish to keep it, you will face the consequences. Return it to us, and we might spare your pitiful fleet. Elias's mind raced as the alien leader's words sunk in. The artifact was not just a weapon. It was a symbol, a power that could change the entire balance of the galaxy. And now, they were caught in a terrible moral dilemma. Should they use the artifact to defend Earth, knowing it could spark an all-out war? Or should they return it, in the hope of forming an alliance with the Zahar Empire? An alliance that could save humanity, but also tie them to an alien empire that might one day demand more than they could give. The choice was not an easy one. The human fleet had no desire to become pawns in a galactic power struggle. They had fought long and hard to protect Earth, and now they were being forced to make a decision that could either protect their people or doom them to a future of slavery under alien rule. Captain, we need to decide, Nora said, her voice urgent. We can't afford to wait. If we don't act soon, we'll be caught between two armies. And that's a fight we can't win. Elias stood in silence, his mind torn. The weight of the decision hung heavy on him. The artifact had the potential to change everything, but at what cost? Could they trust the Zahar Empire? Or would using the artifact against them ignite a war that would destroy everything they fought to protect? The seconds ticked away, and Elias knew that time was running out. Whatever they decided, they needed to act fast, or they would all be destroyed. The tense silence in space was broken by the cold, authoritative voice of Scaris. His message had left the crew of the human fleet with more questions than answers. The artifact, once thought to be a powerful weapon, was now being described by the alien leader as a tool of peace. The notion that something with such destructive power could be used to unite civilizations was difficult to grasp, especially when the Zuhar Empire had shown no signs of wanting peace. Yet, Scaris's words rang in Elias's mind. Only one side will claim it. The choices ahead were growing increasingly complex. Despite the looming uncertainty, Scaris offered a temporary ceasefire. His fleet would hold its position, and he proposed that the humans and the Zuhar Empire work together to understand the artifact's true nature. His voice over the communication lines was surprisingly calm, but there was an underlying sense of urgency in his tone. "The artifact's power is greater than you realize, Captain Hawk," Scaris said. "It can save both of our civilizations if used properly. If we return it to its rightful purpose, perhaps there is still hope for both of us." Elias listened, but his instincts told him not to trust the alien leader. Scaris may have sounded reasonable, but his empire had been nothing but hostile to humanity so far. The ceasefire was temporary, just a way to gain leverage while they figured out what to do with the artifact. The captain's mind was in turmoil. Was the artifact truly a key to peace, or was it just another tool for the Zuhar to control the galaxy? As Elias mulled over his options, something unexpected happened. A rogue faction within the human fleet, led by Commander Benner, decided to take matters into their own hands. Benner had always been a loyal officer, but he was also a man with his own ambitions. He had grown disillusioned with the slow progress of diplomacy, and like many others, feared the alien threat. But rather than accept peace or even an uneasy truce, Benner had come to believe that humanity needed to use the artifact for its own purposes. He saw it as a weapon to conquer the galaxy and ensure humanity's place at the top of the food chain. Without warning, the rogue faction struck. They attacked the command center, overpowering the crew with their superior knowledge of the ship's systems. Within minutes, they had stolen the artifact and were making their way to an old, fast ship in the human fleet, one that had been outfitted with a cloaking device for secret operations. The artifact's power had already started to pulse, and it was clear that Benner was planning to use it, no matter the consequences. Elias's heart sank as the realization hit. The rogue faction was acting on their own, and in doing so, they were putting everyone in grave danger. Not only did this mean that the Zuhar Empire would likely retaliate, but it also meant that humanity would now face a civil war in the midst of a galactic crisis. Desperation set in as the human fleet scrambled into action. The alien Armada, which had been paused by the artifact's activation, began to move again, slowly, as if preparing for what was to come. The clock was ticking, and Elias knew there was no time to waste. The fleet had to stop Benner before it was too late. The chase began. The rogue faction's ship, cloaked in near invisibility, sped through the vacuum of space, launching missiles and activating defensive shields in an attempt to outmaneuver the pursuit. The human fleet's ships, though technologically advanced, were no match for the speed of the cloaked vessel. But the aliens, with their own advanced technology, were now fully aware of the situation and moved to block any possible escape route. The battle was chaos. AI-controlled ships on both sides began launching missile barrages, their sleek forms darting between flashes of light as they dodged, attacked, and countered. Space itself seemed to tear apart as explosions rippled through the void. Cloaking devices activated on both the human and alien ships, creating a maze of near-invisible vessels that seemed to appear and disappear in the blink of an eye. Every second brought a new explosion, a new danger, as the battle raged across the stars. Amidst this confusion, Sergeant Michael Drake, one of Elias's closest friends, and a member of the elite combat team, was struck by a stray missile. The explosion sent his ship spiraling, and despite the desperate attempts to save him, it was too late. The loss of Drake hit the crew like a punch to the gut. He had been one of their best soldiers, a reliable leader, and above all, a close friend to Elias. The emotional toll was immediate, and Elias could feel the weight of it on his shoulders. "Drake? No," Elias whispered, staring at the empty space where the surgeon's ship had once been. He couldn't afford to let grief take hold. Not now, not when everything was on the line. But the loss of a close friend added a new layer of pain to the situation. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was personal. Every decision he made, every strategy he devised, would now carry the weight of that loss. His crew needed him more than ever, but Elias was struggling to keep it together. The rogue faction's ship was still making its escape, but with each passing minute, it became clear that the human fleet was closing in. Benner and his men were desperate, but they were running out of options. The alien Armada had begun to shift, forming a blockade around the rogue ship, and there was no easy way out. The only hope they had was to retrieve the artifact before it could be activated and used to escalate the conflict further. Elias's decision was made. He couldn't allow Benner to use the artifact to destroy everything they had fought for. With the alien ships now focusing their fire on the rogue faction, there was a fleeting chance to act. "All ships, prepare to board the rogue vessel," Elias commanded, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions raging inside him. "We end this now." The crew steeled themselves for the most dangerous part of the mission. In the heart of the battlefield, between two powerful forces, the human fleet would make its final stand. And Elias knew that whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same again. The final battle was about to begin. The tension in space was palpable as the human fleet and the alien Armada joined forces for the first time, united by a common goal: stopping the rogue faction from unleashing the full power of the artifact. Captain Elias Hawk stood at the command center of his flagship, the Intrepid, his hand steady on the console, his heart racing. The stakes had never been higher. As the rogue commander, Benner, activated the artifact's full power, the entire battlefield shifted. A massive energy field erupted from the rogue ship, rippling through space like a shockwave. The field pulsed with destructive energy, its impact felt across the entire area. It was as if a great storm had been unleashed, and everything in its path was doomed. This was not just a weapon, it was a catastrophe in the making. The human and alien fleets, though initially hesitant, now found themselves fighting side by side in a desperate bid to stop the rogue faction. The stakes were clear. Either they stopped Benner, or the galaxy would fall into chaos. The battlefield was a swirling vortex of fire, light, and chaos, with explosions lighting up the dark expanse of space. Plasma bolts shot through the void, each one capable of turning a ship to dust in an instant. Orbital bombardments rained down from both human and alien ships, their firepower immense as they launched salvo after salvo, hoping to break through the rogue ship's defenses. On the ground, close-quarters combat was equally intense. Soldiers from both sides clashed in the corridors of their ships, using advanced weapons and armor that defied imagination. Combat drones and robots whizzed through the air, their movements precise and deadly as they hunted down any enemy they could find. Among the chaos, the human fleet was forced to use all of its technological advantages. One of their stealth ships, cloaked in near invisibility, moved silently through the battlefield. Its mission was clear: sabotage the rogue ship's engines and prevent the artifact from being fully activated. The ship's crew worked quickly, knowing that every second counted. They launched a series of covert strikes, disabling the engines and creating a distraction that allowed the larger fleet to close in. Meanwhile, the alien warships launched their own devastating attacks, unleashing plasma barrages that tore through the darkness. The rogue faction, now fully aware of the danger, retaliated with everything they had. Missiles flew in every direction, and the roar of energy blasts filled the air as both sides fought for control. The battlefield was chaotic, with debris from destroyed ships floating like a deadly cloud, making it difficult for anyone to move freely. It wasn't just the scale of the conflict that was terrifying. It was the unpredictability. One moment, a ship would appear out of the darkness, cloaked in stealth, and the next, it would explode in a brilliant flash of light. The next moment, an enemy vessel would emerge from behind a rock formation, unleashing a barrage of laser fire that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. There was no room for error. Every move, every decision, could be the difference between life and death. As the battle raged on, Captain Hawk began to see the inevitable truth. They were not going to win this fight without a sacrifice. The artifact, with all its power, had become the heart of the rogue ship. If they didn't destroy it, Benner would unleash a devastating force that could tear apart everything they had worked for. Hawk knew that they couldn't allow the artifact to fall into the wrong hands, not when its power could destroy entire civilizations. The realization hit him hard. There was only one way to stop the rogue faction for good. They had to destroy the artifact. But doing so meant taking a massive risk. The artifact was deeply embedded within the rogue ship's core, and any attempt to destroy it would risk the entire vessel exploding. The mission was suicide, but it was the only option left. Hawk made the decision with a heavy heart. "All ships, prepare for a final assault," he commanded. "We're going in for the artifact. This ends now." The fleet was silent as the order spread through the comms. There was no turning back. The human and alien fleets, though still at odds, now worked together like never before. They knew that they had to stop the rogue faction, or the consequences would be far worse than anyone could imagine. As the Intrepid and its allies moved toward the rogue vessel, the battlefield erupted once more in a frenzy of energy blasts and missiles. Hawk's ship took the brunt of the damage, but it pressed on, heading straight for the heart of the rogue ship. The alien Armada followed closely behind, keeping the rogue forces occupied long enough for Hawk and his crew to complete their dangerous mission. In the final moments before the Intrepid reached its target, Hawk's thoughts were clear. He knew that this was the last chance. If they failed, the galaxy would be lost. The artifact's power had to be stopped, no matter the cost. He gripped the command console tightly, knowing that he had just made the most dangerous decision of his life. The Intrepid dove toward the rogue ship, dodging fire from the defending forces. The artifact's energy field was growing stronger, rippling through space, threatening to engulf everything in its path. The crew braced themselves for impact. The final assault was upon them. The tension in space had never been higher. Captain Elias Hawk and his crew aboard the Intrepid were racing against time, heading straight for the rogue faction's flagship. The artifact, the key to either their salvation or destruction, was about to overload. A pulse of energy rippled out from the artifact, shaking the very fabric of space around it. Every second brought them closer to either victory or annihilation. Hawk knew that this moment would define the fate of not only his crew, but also the entire galaxy. As the Intrepid closed in on the rogue ship, the massive energy field emanating from the artifact grew more volatile. Its power was surging out of control, threatening to explode at any moment. The rogue faction's ship, which had once been a symbol of hope and potential, had now become a ticking time bomb. Hawk's mind raced as he analyzed their dwindling options. He had no illusions. The destruction of the artifact was their only hope, but it came at a steep cost. The artifact had proven to be humanity's greatest asset, and now, in its uncontrolled state, it was humanity's greatest curse. The decision was agonizing. Captain Hawk's fingers hovered over the command console as he considered the consequences of his next move. If they destroyed the artifact, they might lose the war. The rogue faction's forces were powerful, and without the artifact, they would be left vulnerable. But if they didn't destroy it, the artifact's catastrophic power would inevitably consume everything in its path. There was no middle ground. It was a decision between risk and survival, between destruction and hope. Hawk, We need to make a choice now. Lieutenant Noravega's voice crackled through the comms, breaking his moment of indecision. The artifact's energy is reaching critical levels. If we don't act fast, it'll take everything with it. The weight of her words hit Hawk like a freight train. There was no time for second-guessing. He had to make the ultimate sacrifice. With a heavy heart, he gave the order. "Prepare to fire. All weapons. Target the artifact," he said, his voice filled with resolve, but laced with sorrow. The crew knew what that meant. The Intrepid would charge directly into the heart of the rogue ship, aiming straight for the artifact's core. If they succeeded, the artifact would be destroyed, but it would come at the cost of their ship, and potentially their lives. The fleet would be left vulnerable, and humanity's hope for victory would hang in the balance. As the Intrepid hurtled toward its target, Sergeant Michael Drake, one of Hawk's closest friends, stood by his side, preparing for the worst. Drake had always been the rock that kept the crew grounded in moments of crisis, and now, with everything on the line, his presence was a steadying force. But in the chaos of battle, disaster struck. A rogue missile barrage from the enemy struck the Intrepid, causing a massive explosion on the ship's lower decks. Drake, who had been in the thick of the action, was gravely injured in the blast. His body was rushed to the medical bay, but it was clear the damage was too severe. As Hawk made his way to his friend's side, he felt the crushing weight of the loss. Michael Drake, the man who had fought beside him for years, was not going to make it. The crew was losing a member of their family, someone who had been a part of every battle, every victory, and every setback. "Stay with me, Sergeant," Hawk whispered, his voice strained, as he held Drake's hand. But there was no response. The life slowly drained from Drake's eyes, and in that moment, Hawk understood the true cost of war. It was not just the destruction of ships and cities. It was the loss of those who mattered most. Drake's death struck a deep blow to the crew. The emotional toll of the war had been mounting, but now it was personal. The loss of one of their own turned the battlefield into a place of sorrow and regret. Yet despite the pain, the crew pressed on. They couldn't afford to give up. Drake wouldn't want them to. They had to finish the mission, no matter the cost. With heavy hearts, the Intrepid finally reached its target. The rogue ship was a colossal beast, brimming with advanced weapons and energy fields. But none of that mattered now. The artifact was the key, and it had to be destroyed. Hawk gave the final command. The crew unleashed everything they had left, sending every last ounce of firepower toward the artifact's core. The explosion that followed was catastrophic. The artifact, the source of so much power and hope, was obliterated in a blinding flash of light. The rogue ship shuddered, its defenses collapsing in the wake of the destruction. The artifact's chaotic energy was finally neutralized, and the rogue faction, weakened without their greatest weapon, was no longer a threat. As the smoke cleared, the human fleet and their alien allies remained standing. Though the cost had been immense, the battle had been won, but the victory felt hollow. The artifact had been their greatest hope, but it had also been their greatest curse. The loss of so many lives, the deaths of soldiers and friends, was a weight that would never be fully lifted. Yet, in the end, it was not the artifact that secured their victory. It was the unity of the humans and aliens, the sacrifice of those who had given everything for the greater good, and the indomitable willpower of Captain Hawk and his crew. As the dust settled, Captain Hawk looked out into the vastness of space, his thoughts heavy with loss but filled with a quiet sense of triumph. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, and they had overcome it, not because of the artifact, but because of each other. They had fought together, sacrificed together, and in the end, they had won together. The galaxy was still in turmoil, and there would be more battles ahead, but for now, there was peace. And for Hawk, that was enough. "Tell the fleet to stand down," Hawk said, his voice steady but filled with grief. "We've won, but it came at a cost." The crew of the Intrepid had fought and died together, and they would carry the memory of that sacrifice with them, knowing that they had done something no one thought possible. The galaxy would never forget the bravery of those who had stood against the rogue faction, and the courage of those who had made the ultimate sacrifice for the future of all. The battle was over. The rogue faction was no more, and the artifact's destructive energy had been neutralized. The cost of the war had been heavy. Many lives had been lost, both human and alien, but in the quiet that followed, a new beginning was born. The surviving humans and their alien allies slowly regrouped, floating amidst the wreckage of the battlefield. Their ships were battered, their crews bruised, but there was a sense of something greater in the air. The galaxy, once on the brink of total destruction, was now on the edge of a fragile peace. Captain Elias Hawk stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of space. The stars glittered softly in the distance, their light symbolizing the hope that had survived the chaos. The fight for survival had not been easy, but now there was a chance for something better, something the galaxy had never truly known: unity. Humanity had been thrust into the middle of a cosmic war, facing forces far beyond their comprehension, but they had risen to the challenge. They had fought not for power, not for ancient artifacts, but for their very survival. And in doing so, they had earned something far more valuable: respect. Scaris, the alien leader, approached Captain Hawk's ship after the final battle, his warship hovering in the distance. Though the fight had been fierce, and though Scaris had lost much, he could not deny the bravery and resolve of the humans. He contacted Hawk directly, his voice crackling through the comms. "Captain Hawk," Scaris began, his tone solemn yet filled with respect. "The artifact has been destroyed, and your people have proven themselves to be more than just survivors. You are a force to be reckoned with. The rogue faction's failure is a testament to your strength and unity. We acknowledge your bravery and your people's resilience." Hawk stood in silence for a moment, reflecting on the weight of the words. He had never imagined that one day an alien leader would speak of humans with such admiration. Yet it wasn't just the artifact that had earned them this respect. It was their unity, their ability to face overwhelming odds and fight together for a common cause. Scaris continued, his voice steady. "While this battle has ended, the future of the galaxy is still uncertain. However, I believe we can move forward together. The lessons we have learned are invaluable. It is not the power of the artifacts or advanced technology that will save us. It is understanding, cooperation, and trust." Captain Hawk nodded slowly. "I agree. Power can be a double-edged sword. It can destroy or protect, depending on how it's used. What matters now is what we choose to do next. The galaxy doesn't need another weapon. It needs peace." A quiet pause followed, as both sides pondered the path ahead. Scaris, despite his defeat, seemed to understand. The arrogance of his earlier attitude, which had once placed alien technology and power above all else, was replaced by a more humble acceptance of the new reality. Perhaps the galaxy didn't need another war. It needed something that had been lacking for so long: understanding between different races, the willingness to work together despite their differences. As the alien armada began to depart, leaving the human fleet in the quiet aftermath, Hawk looked at the stars once more. He thought about the lives lost, about Sergeant Michael Drake's sacrifice, about the countless others who had given their all. But he also thought about the future that might now be possible. For the first time in a long while, Hawk allowed himself a moment of hope. Back aboard the Intrepid, as the crew began to rebuild and tend to the wounded, there was a shared sense of accomplishment. They had done the impossible, not through the use of ancient weapons or superior technology, but through their determination, their willpower, and their ability to stand united in the face of overwhelming odds. It wasn't the artifact that had saved them. It was their hearts. Captain Hawk's reflection was interrupted by the voice of Lieutenant Noravega. "Sir, the fleet is ready for departure. What are your orders?" Hawk straightened, wiping away a tear that had formed in his eye. "Set course for Earth. It's time to go home." As the Intrepid turned toward the distant stars, heading back to Earth, Hawk felt the weight of his decision. The price of peace, the sacrifices made, and the lessons learned. There was still much work to be done. The galaxy was fragile, and peace would not come easily. But for now, humanity had earned a place among the stars. They had faced the darkness and survived, not because they wielded ancient power, but because they refused to give up. It was a message that resonated deeply within Hawk's heart, a truth that he would carry with him always. He stepped onto the bridge and looked out at the vastness of space. The stars, once distant and cold, now seemed to shimmer with a new light. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also full of possibilities. And as long as humanity stood together, they would face whatever came next, not with fear, but with hope. The artifact had changed everything. But in the end, it was humanity's heart that would shape the future. The galaxy had learned something important through the war. True power lies not in weapons or technology, but in the strength of unity and the courage to make difficult choices. Captain Hawk knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, struggles, and setbacks. But for the first time in a long time, he was filled with hope. And that, he knew, was more powerful than any artifact could ever be.